Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another event hosted by the Cambridge University Social Impact and Sustainability Society. The topic for today is how can hip hop inspire positive change in marginalized communities? And we are thrilled to present to you our guest speaker for today, Mr. Khafre Jay, whom our society president, Mr. Navin Seeterram, will introduce shortly. My name is Michael Sanchez, and I'm the Social Impact Director at CUSIS, and I'm pleased to welcome you to this session tonight. This event is being recorded, and it will be available in YouTube. And for those in the Cambridge Judge Business School, you'll be happy to know that this will be uploaded in your VLE soon. So some housekeeping rules before we start. We'd like you to just turn off your, please put your microphone to mute. And then if you have any questions, just address your questions to Ines Collier or to me, and then we will send them to Navin Seeterram in due time during the Q&A session. So we promise we will do our best to get as many questions as we can, finishing at 7 p.m. UK time. Now I'm pleased to pass on to the main event where our president, Mr. Navin Seeterram, will introduce Mr. Khafre Jay.
I would like to start off by recognizing the tragic conflict unfolding in Ukraine. Here at the Cambridge University Social Impact and Sustainability Society, we stand with Ukraine, and we recognize that not all Russians support the government's military aggression, and we hope that a move towards a peaceful resolution is attainable as soon as possible. For today's session, I want to start with a quote from Harper Lee's 1960 classic To Kill a Mockingbird, where she describes what real courage is in 2 sentences. It reads, I wanted you to see what real courage is. Instead of getting the idea that courage is a man with a gun in his hand, it's when you know you're licked before you begin, but you begin anyway, and you see it through no matter what. Harper Lee reframes real courage as being one with resilience and perseverance through times of difficulty and distress. It is the real courage many folks on the downside of advantage, especially who are Black, Indigenous, and people of color, hashtag BIPOC in America and across the world. It is also the real courage I believe will bring reward to the grassroots hip hop work for change of hip hop for change, and as led by our speaker for this evening, Mr. Khafre Jay. In recognition of Black History Month in America, the hashtag BLM and hashtag BIPOC connect the narratives of marginalized communities, which is related to the work within social impact and ESG. While the impact investing in ESG literature certainly does not exclude the work of grassroots groups from the employment of responsible capital, it can perhaps lay stronger foundations to build that bridge towards the positive contributions of hip hop. For the uninitiated, the meanings around hip hop carry several perceptions and connotations around it. Perhaps one of the most famed teachers of hip hop culture, KRS-One, explained that hip hop is a moniker for conscious movement. Hip means to know, as in to be hip to, or to be conscious of. Hop means movement or action. Like any true art form, the goal of hip hop is to make the unseen properly seen, promoting defamiliarization to appreciate what we may have missed. This is the endeavor of hip hop artists such as Chuck B, KRS-One, De La Soul, A Tribe Called Quest, Talib Kweli, Common, Yasin Bey, formerly known as Mos Def. And that then brings me to Khafre Jay, and I will introduce him accordingly. Khafre Jay is a hip hop artist, grassroots activist, and disruptor from Oakland, California, in the USA. Khafre's work has impacted tens of thousands of community members and raised millions of dollars to further promote social justice in the San Francisco Bay Area. He was honored with the 2020 William J. Zellerbach Award for Social Change and the Symphony's 2020 Ellen Magnin Newman Award for Outstanding Arts Organization. Khafre has been featured in TEDx, Mother Jones Daily Cause, the SF Chronicle, the Oakland Tribune, the Pop Vulture magazine, and musical Bailout. Also, his change work has been featured on grassroots and national media outlets. Khafre has been giving talks at universities across the US, and as a performing artist, he's shared stage with world-class acts such as Rakim, Method Man, Dead Prez, Hieroglyphics, Talib Kweli, and many more. And so with that, ladies and gentlemen, I give you Mr. Khafre Jay. Khafre, the floor is all yours.
Roadblocks in the way now. No, not grenade rounds. When the whole block gets sprayed down by some more cops who hate brown. With my hands up, I get laid down. If I stand up, I get banged down. White hoods on under riot gear. They inspire fear. They bring pain around. And it's the same sound that my dad heard as his dreams flew like a blackbird, but got shot down and captured. Revolution was his last word. And I'm standing on my last nerves, but that's third. Up in the projects, we got scared because these cops are some bastards. They shoot us like Ku Klux and they spraying brothers faster than Hussein Bolt to some new chucks. The man ain't giving two fucks. The game is how they do us. Got screwed up maneuvers just trying to raise the mood up, and we break laws to chew food up. So we're fighting over a few bucks, and the side you got to choose up, because forget the middle. My spit will be fighting blue blood because the war's on and the block's cursed, and it's going to get a lot worse. So every time I see that cop's hearse, I always remember they shot first. And they're going to shoot us tomorrow and the next week and the next month and the next year. So I want to know what y'all are going to do about it. How y'all doing? My name is Khafre Jay. I'm the founder and executive director of Hip Hop for Change out here in Oakland, California. And I like to start off my talks with that rap because hip hop is crucial. It is a tool to speak our truth, just like Navin said. But I think a lot of people view hip hop through media, and that lies the problem. I'm going to start out with a couple of stats for y'all because data is really telling. Since the year 2010 to 2018, 93.1% of all hip hop songs in the top 100 and the top 200 charts were owned by three corporations: Time, Sony, and Universal Music Groups, respectively. What that means is that hip hop, this beautiful culture that is representative of BIPOC youth and urban communities, is no longer controlled by our communities. And it's really horrible when culture gets taken over by capitalism and corporatism. Right now, 60.1% of all consumers of hip hop in America are white audiences. About 90% of hip hop is bought extra communally. And that's not to say that white people can't rap. Hip hop is the most diverse cultural form that humanity's ever created, and it's welcome for all. But it's really important to know that about 90% of hip hop is not bought in the communities it represents or it comes from. And yeah, it brings us to know that hip hop is a $7 billion industry. It has turned that way from corporations really taking hip hop and taking the pieces of it that's really marketable, the music, right? And pushing that out to the forefront, almost so that people don't even understand really what hip hop is. And so that's essentially why, this topic, the title of this topic, how hip hop can help marginalized communities. For us, we've always known that hip hop is what we created to help marginalized communities. And what is hip hop? Essentially, hip hop is a social justice movement. And a lot of people, their ears perk up when I say hip hop is a social justice movement. But if we think about what social justice is, the distribution of wealth, of opportunities, of privileges in a society. That's what hip hop does for us. I mean, for example, me being on this lecture talking for you folks right now, it's a privilege to be here. It's an honor to be here. It's going to be a feather in my cap for a while. But how do we create a pathway for other kids in the hood that are maybe even more genius than me to be able to talk in places like this as well? I think that's what hip hop has always been seeking, right? Hip hop started in 1973 on paper, but hip hop comes from an unbroken chain of creative excellence coming out of Black and brown communities. Hip hop is not just rap, that's one part of it. It's also breakdancing, it's also graffiti art, it's also DJing and beat making. For example, my background right here, right? A lot of people see this, they see art. I see this, I see hip hop making its way into galas around the world. When Basquiat was tapped by Andy Warhol. I think there's a lot of Basquiats in our communities that are seeking to find a place and a space to, speak their truths and their reality. But that's very, very difficult when hip hop has been thoroughly commodified by three corporations. They don't care about our cultural norms. They don't care about our values. They don't care about the impacts of Black and brown youth in media. And I think the most insidious part of this is that America nowadays is more segregated than it's ever been in our history. Right now, according to the American Research Religious Institute, which I do not quote too often, y'all, but they did a study that showed 70% of white people do not have a single person of color for a friend in the US. And that's very telling. I mean, when I walk down the liberal, and I'm putting my quotes up for a real good reason, but when I walk through the liberal streets of the Bay Area here, more than half of the people that walk past me grab their babies in some way, shape, or form while they pass me. And that used to break my heart. Now I really understand it thoroughly because of my study, because of my edification. And I just tell people, I don't eat babies, I'm full, thank you. You know, I've got to say something because I've seen people put their kids in fight or flight responses, literally, and they look up at me and I can see them, you know, being conditioned to be afraid of Black people as they pass me. And these people that walk past me, they don't know I've taught 10, 20,000 kids in my time. You know, they don't know that I'm the executive director of a nonprofit. But again, I have the coping mechanisms to deal with that. But most of our kids here in the US do not. And I see it every day. I see the trauma, I see the fear, I see the isolation because we are so thoroughly segregated. And it's kind of like an intercolonialism where in my neighborhood in Hunters Point, San Francisco, in this gilded city, we have a toxic Superfund site that contains radiation at the Navy Hunters Point shipyard. We have the sewage treatment plant where San Francisco ships all the poo to the east side, just our neighborhood, so we can deal with the pollution, and then ships it all the way out 10 miles to the west, just so it doesn't have to offend white neighborhoods. We have to go outside our community for water, for food, for education, for healthcare, for jobs. So we really know white people in our communities. You know, all the stories in the movies are about white folks here in America. All the media is. So we know white folks. But the problem is that I don't think white folks know us besides these media representations, right? In San Francisco specifically, I live in a neighborhood called Hunters Point. It is the last Black bastion of Blackness in San Francisco. And everybody has this Hunters Point story that one time they went through Hunters Point to see us. So really, you have to understand, people in America are learning about people like me almost purely from the way these three corporations are representing hip hop. And it's killing us. It is literally the justification for the criminalization of Black and brown youth. And that's really important. When I was 14, me and my friends, we were trying to, become positive. We were getting in the early 90s, this kind of push to go through this gangster culture as corporations kind of commodified our culture. I was also, learning how to find my base of power as a Black man, you know what I'm saying? And that's a real big challenge when you live in the hood and nothing is promised. In fact, my parents told me once you leave the door of your house, you are not safe and everything can be taken from you and people might not even be there to protect you. So everything for us is survival, trying to find a means of self-determination, a tool to be able to have some semblance of safety. And me and 4 friends started working at the San Francisco League of Urban Gardens. We were trying to be good. We were gonna, go garden. We were gonna go get our, first paychecks, and we did. I remember getting a $67 paycheck, and me and 3 of our friends said, "Yo, we're gonna go buy video games. Let's go." And we went down to Bayview Hunters Point Bank, and we went all at the same time with stars in our eyes, ready to go buy video games. And some of y'all might know where this story is going, but 3 of our friends had bank accounts there, including me. So we cashed our check and one of our friends was getting a bank account made. So we were waiting outside, inside. We were 15-year-old kids. And I remember looking up and looking outside and the entire plaza was filled with as many police cars as they could possibly fit in that plaza with guns drawn, pointed at us, screaming at us. Come out with your hands up, drop the weapons. I'm 15, right? And mind you, it was sprinkling outside, so I had a black umbrella, and I just threw that instinctually. And I think about it nowadays. My parents had so thoroughly given me the Black talk that at 15, instinctually, I was like, that's not supposed to be in my hand right now. And 15-year-old kids should not have to think like that. They shouldn't. They just shouldn't. So we stood up in single file, and one friend went this way when he walked out the door. He disappeared. Another friend went this way. I have my hands up walking out and everything is telling me, do not walk out this door, do not walk out this door. And everything else is telling me, you better walk out this door, you better walk out this door. When I did, I don't really remember what happened to me other than being slammed into a wall. I remember when I got home, I had stucco marks on my forehead because they were pushing a 9mm gun so hard into the back of my head while they were beating me, screaming, where's the guns, where's the money? The bank manager knew my entire family, so he comes out trying to say, stop. And they beat him up a little bit and threw him back in the bank. And after about 2 or 3 minutes of brutality, sorry, my coworker here wanted to say something. But after about 2 minutes of brutality, the brutality kind of waned. And I realized that somebody called the police on us because 4 15-year-old Black kids must be robbing the bank, right? We looked hip hop. I don't know, but this is what we deal with every day, is the weight of this perception of who I can possibly be while I walk into a bank, while I walk in to get a job, while I walk into everywhere. And when we look at the media and we see these people in hip hop throwing dollars up in the air, making it rain, disrespecting women and all this, I don't think people will hire me to be a bank manager if I look like this. And that's sad. So when we talk about hip hop being a social justice movement, I think it's the same extension of the same things that we've been dealing with since birth of a nation and the start of media. And I think there's a certain type of mental laziness that comes along with people when they learn facts that affirm their beliefs about Black people. So when they look online and on media and they see these representations, I hear it all the time. Well, why are you folks so violent? Well, if you don't want to be looked at as violent, why do you rap about that stuff? You know what I'm saying? I think there's such a large amount of mental laziness that people do not even question representations coming out of media when it affirms their beliefs. And I tell people all the time, we don't get mad at Mexican culture because Taco Bell is not that good, right? You know what I'm saying? Taco Bell ain't that good, but no one's saying, hey, Mexican culture is crazy because Taco Bell is this conglomerate that doesn't represent the culture. And that is essentially what we're doing with Black and brown youth, because this is the mechanism that we justify the oppression of our youth. This is the pipeline to prison from schools. It just is. And not only are these young kids who are so thoroughly excluded from opportunity, from wealth, from privilege, not only are they hurting, but they're also trying to find ways that become toxic when they realize that they can't make it in this society, when they realize that they are not the ones that are going to get that job, when they go to the job and they have a trauma response because a boss might say something racist and they're not supposed to even be able to deal with that well, and they can't, so they lose their job. This has been the struggle that we've always dealt with, especially when hip hop started back in the 1970s in New York, where when you went to school, there was no art class. And if you did have art class, there was no black crayon or black colored pencil, because those always go first. And if you went to a poor school, you know what I'm talking about, right? We go to these schools, and in America today, Black people have 50% less access to art classes as white people here in America. And that's sad, especially when the American Psychological Association says expressive arts is the go-to for trauma when it comes to kids, and we don't have the art classes or the art supplies because of property tax being related to how much each individual zip code has for their schooling. So we see these kids growing up with nothing, and that's why hip hop costs nothing to do. Hip hop has 4 elements: breaking, rapping, graffiti art, DJing, and the 5th element is knowledge, cultural awareness about who you are and where you come from. Really, really important. It costs nothing to break dance. It just doesn't. And I hear teachers all the time say, how do you get kids to fall in love with being healthy? Well, all the break dancers I know talk about neuromuscular junctions and mind-body connections, and half of them are vegan. You know what I'm saying? It's just the way we share our cultural knowledge. We look at art and graffiti, and we see these kids that are criminalized. In fact, I say this all the time. You see people at galas with their Pinot and their meats and cheeses, and they're looking at their paintings and they're talking about the chiaroscuro and, oh, this is reminiscent of Fauvism and Impressionism and whatnot. And look at these people in this gala while they're enjoying their art. That, they feel exalted because they're doing something so wonderful. They also feel safe, right? There's no fear when they're at this gala. Their stomachs are full, right? They're just embodying joy at that moment. Well, in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and even now, kids who have no access to art, they stole paint. And they broke into train yards, risking their life and their limb, right? Risking getting beaten down and brutalized by police and taken into the prison pipeline for their art. You know what I'm saying? And they spend all night painting entire trains, and the next day they come down to the subway stations, and they sit there with their friends. Maybe they have a beer, maybe they have a joint, maybe they don't smoke, but they're all watching their trains go by. They don't have any pinkies up, there's no Pinot, but they're talking about the same chiaroscuro. Maybe they might not be saying chiaroscuro, but they say, yo, look at my shading, right? Look at my shading, the gradation that I did, It's the same type of knowledge. DJing, rapping, this is all art that costs Black and brown youth nothing. And more importantly, hip hop is one of the few cultures that has this ingrained nugget of self-affirmation in it, right? You don't see too many people rapping saying, I ain't nobody special. Hip hop is literally a celebration of identity. And it was created because that was a vacuum it was needing to fill. So this culture that is the largest human expressive culture in the world, that is rooted in just a celebration of self, it is incredibly healing for kids in the hood. In fact, it healed me. You know what I'm saying? When nothing in your entire life tells you that you are somebody. And notice all our social justice movements have been rooted in the saying, I am a man, I am somebody, ain't I a woman, I'm a human being, right? Hip hop is no different, regardless of how white media shows us. Hip hop has always been saying, I am someone. So these kids who are 12 to 13 create breaking, right? Rapping, they create something free. Even here's a funny anecdote. In 1976 in New York during the blackout, right? It was about, I think at that time, there was probably 3 or 4 famous DJs at that time, right? When hip hop was starting. 1976 blackout happened and every music store in New York was broken into and cleaned out. And the next month, there were hundreds of DJs and rappers and everything. And, I don't condone breaking into stores, but the amount of art that was created from these people that had nothing, that literally took an opportunity to get it, was immense. Hip hop literally came into a renaissance because of that ability to take those pieces of equipment. And I argue that it's society's responsibility to make sure that our young kids have access to creative tools. We don't, unfortunately. If you're in the suburbs and you don't look like me in America, you probably have the tools. If you look like me and you're from a marginalized community, you probably do not have the tools, and that's a shame. But rap saved me. I remember trying to find my base of power. I remember falling into the same, toxic masculine tropes. And when I first started rapping, you probably wouldn't want to listen to what I was rapping about. I was rapping about girls that didn't like me, money I didn't have, and cars I'd never driven, because I was trying to find out how to be powerful. And I, I think that's the unifying struggle in the hood, is trying to find out where you fit in and how you can find that self-determination. And if we don't have those connections to mentors, that intergenerational connection, our kids get very, very lost very quickly. So it wasn't until I heard Mos Def, right? It wasn't until I heard artists like De La Soul and Native Tongues and whatnot, where I heard my ancestral drums for the first time, where I heard artists that were speaking so much more powerfully than anything I'd ever heard, talking about not money, but talking about a lack of resources and the fight for self-determination for our people. That resonated with me so much. And so by 20, now I'm an activist. And I'm wondering if I had spent my teens rapping about police brutality, right? Economic exploitation. If I'd have spent my teens rapping about what I was living, would I be as traumatized as I am today? You know what I'm saying? Would I understand my condition? Where would I be? And I think that's essentially what I've done with Hip Hop for Change. Because once you hear your ancestral drums, you can't unhear that. You just can't. Once kids understand, they come from, Ida B. Wells, they come from Marcus Garvey, they come from Kwame Ture, they come from all these beautiful people that have been fighting just as hard as these kids fight in the hood to find out, to find their worth, their value. They find a different way to do that. And when they do it through hip hop, they immediately start getting introspective and start breaking down their condition and start trying to understand where they come from. That is the tool that almost 100% of youth in America and arguably most kids in the world are primed with. And so, you know, I don't know. I think because of that in my 20s, I spent my 20s becoming an educator, becoming a teacher. It was just natural for me because I don't want kids and little homies to go through what I went through, to go through that pain. Because I'm telling you, when I say I should not be here today, I should not be here today. Half the men that were on my school bus in middle school are not here today. They just aren't. And they were Basquiats and they were Monets. You know, and they were beautiful people for the struggle. And half of them are. And that doesn't mean they've made it. You know what I'm saying? These kids are so powerful. They're so strong that they're willing to do the most dangerous things to try to make it. You know, imagine if they had an actual on-ramp to an opportunity where they didn't have to risk life and limb. Those would be the best salespeople in the world, right? Those might be the best executives. Those might be the best communications directors. And I see these little geniuses struggling just to have a sense of self-worth, a sense of self-esteem, and a sense of self-efficacy. And that's why I started Hip Hop for Change, to take back that control. And, you know, through my education and through my work, I don't think I ever thought that there was a chance for me to make it. But then, you know, I know you folks have Greenpeace out there in the UK and probably a lot of the places where we work. I became the first African-American city coordinator running Greenpeace's fundraising team in 2009, I think. I ran that office for about 3.5 years, and I learned some crazy practices. You know, I joke often, I said, I learned how to raise $500,000 without going to the federal penitentiary. And that's serious. But getting out there on the streets and being able to talk to people is something that's wildly valuable. And I think back then I saw this as something that white social justice orgs did. It wasn't until I started digging into my own history to learn people like Ida B. Wells and Rosa Parks that these practices of grassroots organizing are something that is in my epigenetics, that's built into my culture and the struggle of Black and brown people. So when I left Greenpeace, I was wondering what to do. And I have been spinning my wheels because most hip hop artists that I know are activists. They're educators. They work in literacy and art, and you know, they're trying to make it, or they're working crappy jobs trying to have enough energy to create these beautiful, empowering narratives. Hip hop in the community is exactly like the people in your own community. Most people are beautiful, right? And every community has jerks, but we just have 3 corporations that only invest in our jerks for the entertainment of suburban, mostly white people. But what that really means is that I'm not going to get paid to open up for these large artists, and I'm never going to get a paycheck unless I'm talking about gangsterism. So that leaves out about 85% of rappers who don't rap about that stuff, that are just not getting paid. And it hurts when we go to these shows and these ciphers and we see powerful women and powerful queer people and powerful people from every different intersection of life rapping their behinds off, but we can't pay them. You know what I'm saying? And they're tired because they just got off a crappy job working at Starbucks. So that's why I started Hip Hop for Change. If I can take these practices of activism and employ people to stand in affluent white spaces wearing this in white supremacy shirt, we can have 50,000 conversations in white neighborhoods in the Bay Area and find our allies and teach them about the importance of our culture. And take that money back from the hood. It's actually a Robin Hood theory. So we take that back and we educate kids. For about 9 years, I've been pulling this organization out of the magma to get all these educators and these activists and these rappers and breakers and graffiti artists I know, to get them fingerprinted, TB tested, insured, and trauma informed so they can be employed not in crappy jobs, but employed in schools. So teaching these kids exactly how to be the bosses and the rappers and the graffiti artists that they want to be, but not just teaching them how to do the art, but to teaching them how to make a life out of that, to find self-determination, to find, you know, the ways that people use these art practices to make a living. That's the social justice here. It's not just art for healing, it's art for survival. And that's what the culture of hip hop is rooted in, survival and expression. So since 9 years ago, we've employed over 1,000 people in our community, mostly from the hood, mostly Black and brown people, half hip hop artists. And Hip Hop for Change has the highest retention rate of any grassroots street team I've ever heard of in about 5.5 months, because people are out there standing in neighborhoods where we've never felt comfortable, y'all. And I got to tell you, it took me until I was 25 to be able to comfortably make eye contact with white women in America. It's not safe. It was a white woman who called the police on me saying I was going to the bank. And that wasn't the first time I've been beaten at gunpoint, you know? Both times white women called. So we stand in these neighborhoods where we are fearful. And now this kid comes in here to Hip Hop for Change and sees me, you know, see somebody yell at me over me wearing this in white supremacy shirt. They call the police on me. The police come and I dress that police officer down saying, hey, I'm here doing my job. I'm permitted. I need you to tell this Karen to leave me alone now so I can get back to my activism. Thank you for protecting and serving me. And that always blows these young Black and brown kids' minds, right? Because a police officer will definitely shoot a Black man, but they will never shoot a Black activist with a notebook and a clipboard. And that was so new to me. And that's the reason why I think these people stay on so long, because we're learning how to stand strong in places we never have. We're also learning how to take $5 million from communities, and we've never even talked numbers like this. And we bring that back. With that, we taught 28,000 kids K through 12 the history of hip hop, you know, how to express themselves, how to be rooted in it. And we throw the fattest progressive shows in the West Coast rooted around women's empowerment and mothers in hip hop, environmental justice and equity. So what we're doing is creating the industry and the community that our culture lacks and that's been taken away from us. I'm a little crazy, but I was talking to a lady that runs a $27 billion donor advised fund, and I figured I was thinking a little too small, you know? And I think that's essentially what we do sometimes. And I want to tell you how deep this gets. I didn't even tell people that I was the executive director of Hip Hop for Change for the first year and a half I started this, because I didn't think white America would donate to me. You know, I didn't think they would support me. And that imposter syndrome, that is what our people are dealing with. And that's why people get so inspired when they see something like Hip Hop for Change, because essentially when you're hip hop, nothing and no one supports you. Nothing. In fact, when you're hip hop, people want to beat you down. They want to put you in a box. They want to marginalize you. They want to grab your babies. And that's a shame, because in America and arguably around the world, places like Mumbai, Glasgow, you know what I'm saying, Japan, South Korea, like hip hop, that's our kids. So I'll say this. We have two options right now, and there really is just two. We're either going to let 3 corporations own the identity of hip hop. We're going to let 3 corporations own the way that white America and the white world essentially, views Black youth. We're going to let that mental laziness continue, or we're going to stand up for Black and brown people right now. And I really need folks to stand up for Black and brown people. Hip hop is the #1 vehicle that we're using today to criminalize our youth. It's happening in the UK, right? It's happening over here. And I know a lot of people look at drill rap in UK and they say, oh my God, oh my God. But think of all the rappers in the UK that aren't getting deals, that aren't getting signed, that aren't getting the shows and events that are rapping about the most positive things, the most inspiring things, and having the narratives that our young kids need. And they're there spinning their wheels. And that's a big issue. I just talked to my alma mater, my high school, their PTA, and I dressed those parents down. And I said, you know, you parents are so cultured here in San Francisco. You take your kids to the Asian Art Museum and the Museum of the African Diaspora and Chinese Lunar New Year and, you know, this festival and, you know, the Carnival and all. You want your kids to know everything, but you haven't taken your kid to one hip hop show in your entire life. You know, your kid listens to hip hop daily and all you can say is, oh, that crazy stuff. And as a parent, you haven't even looked up any songs to say, hey, this is good hip hop. And when I said that, I saw all these liberal progressive faces drop, you know, and they realized, oh my God, I have been conditioned. And, you know, even I was conditioned by that stuff. But that is essentially what we're doing. We are literally segregating an entire culture and becoming so mentally lazy that we're just able to say, that's bad. That's bad. And so what is hip hop? Hip hop is not music, y'all. Hip hop is my culture. It's my vernacular. It's my dialect. It's the way I dress. It's how I talk. It's how I walk. It is how I dance. It is my chiaroscuro. It is how I paint. You know what I'm saying? It is not just the art, it's my people, it's my community, it is the trials, it is the tribulations that we go through, it is the connective tissue that connects us. So in closing, I just want y'all to question yourselves. And I want you to question what you've thought about hip hop in your lives. I want you to question when you've seen this pathology come on the radio, come on the media, come on TV, who did you blame that pathology for, right? When you see nothing but Cardi B and Nicki Minaj, right? And they have to fight each other, right? And you say, oh, hip hop, they use the B word and all this other stuff. Do you say hip hop doesn't like women? Or do you think that half of our culture is women that are being oppressed and not allowed to get to a microphone because of the desires of patriarchal, white suburban societies? Who are you blaming for this? Because I know in 400 years of history here, we've been trying to speak from call and response in the fields, to blues, to gospel, to jazz, to rock, to disco. We've been trying to speak. And now with hip hop, I think it's kind of resulted in like the ultimate laziness for society, looking at Black and brown youth who are geniuses. So I don't know. This is why I'm so passionate. This is why I spend so much time, because I don't want any of our little homies getting beaten down at gunpoint, trying to cash their first paychecks. And if they do, I want them to have the artistic creative tools to untraumatize themselves. And after they untraumatize themselves, I want them to have the economic self-determination so they can teach way more youth under them and lead them, up so they can get past their trauma as well. That's what Hip Hop for Change is. So I encourage y'all to go to our website. I encourage y'all to subscribe to our newsletter. I encourage y'all to listen to hip hop. I encourage y'all to celebrate hip hop like you celebrate, I don't know, every other thing that you celebrate. And just thank you. Thank you to Cambridge for having me. Thank you, Navin, for setting this up. And thank you to everybody who took time to listen and hear us out. I'm ready for questions.
Okay, great. Really great job, Khafre. We're thrilled to have you, as you know.
Thank you.
And I guess we'll let the questions sort of populate what's being transmitted over. So I have a kind of question for you, if you don't mind, right? While that's happening, I was wondering, as you sort of recount your personal struggles and you share those human experiences, how did you transcend that to find the empathy to come up with the constructive means to do what you're doing now?
Initially, not well. I actually have teeth marks in every finger I have. I was so thoroughly beaten down by society. By age 16, I had my own gang. My junior year, I went to 13 days of school and I robbed people every other day. I didn't want to get jumped anymore. I didn't want to get beaten up. I almost didn't make it. I got arrested twice. I almost didn't make it. I turned inward, and that's what a lot of people do. You either find a way to do it or you say, forget it. I'm going to rebel against society. So I did. And, essentially I was lucky. I was so lucky to get kicked out of that high school away from all these toxic people. And my older brother went to San Francisco School of the Arts when it first started, so that the principal let me in. He shouldn't have, but he did. And I got that meditative, artistic, creative space where I was safe for once in my life. That's what saved my life. Chance.
Okay, so we have questions. Yeah, chance. Yeah, exactly. I was just thinking that it should not have been chance, but you capitalized on the chance you took, right? And you got. So yeah. Right. So I'll go to the questions from the audience. I don't want to hog the conversation, even though, well, I would like to, but I shouldn't. Okay. So the first question is, could you discuss the generational gap with respect to hip hop? And to clarify, as an older generation, white privileged woman, my generation associates hip hop with violence, pants below your butt, loud booming coming from dark tinted cars, and a general sense of anger, not a beautiful or poetic movement. How can we reach the older, therefore powers that be generations with a message of social justice through hip hop representation?
Yeah, absolutely. So number one, the generational gaps that we have in Black and brown communities are purely created by white supremacy and a lack of access to resources. So we have to work so hard to get resources, we don't have time. That's just it. We don't have time to go to parks or go to this or go to that when we're working 2 or 3 jobs. And mind you, one of the last hip hop shows I went to, one of the homies put his cane down before he started rapping, the Cold Crush Brothers. So, that's essentially what we need to do, is create the spaces for us to have time to just come together, because we do that naturally in collectivist cultures anyway. But especially, I think the number one way that you start getting into this, I think you're doing the right step. You're watching me talk. You're learning about hip hop. And that's just what it is, I think the same thing with me learning patriarchy, right? I had all these preconceived notions about my effects on women and whatnot, and you almost couldn't tell me that, I remember somebody said, don't use the B words in your raps. And I said, I'm not even calling women the B word. Like, it made so much sense to me. But we're all conditioned with these really facile understandings of things and these facile means of now analyzing other cultures. And so we just really have to critically analyze that, see where it comes from, and really accept the fact that you don't know crap about hip hop. You thought you did. And maybe before this, you're like, man, hip hop is, and mind you, all Black music is booming, right? It's percussive. So we're never going to stop. That's never going to be, if you don't like booming music, don't hang out. But I would say that not all hip hop is booming. I have friends that rap in front of classical, bands, and 3/3 and 3/4 time signatures sometimes. But I would just say this: once you realize that you've been sold a bill of goods about somebody else's culture, first get mad why you accepted that, and try to find that. But then second, go explore, go learn. I wish I could see Breaking Bad all over again and never seen it before, right? It'd be cool, but I already seen it. Now you are in this unique place where you've never experienced hip hop like I have. Man, I wish I could relive learning what hip hop was like you're about to, because it was so informative for me, so galvanizing. So I would say, be curious. Be curious. Go watch a bunch of documentaries, and I have a bunch if you'd like to know.
Right. Yeah, you can share that in the chat with us, and we can pass it on. Right, we can put it in the event page after on our LinkedIn group. We can do that. We'd be happy to share that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a few questions here. Well, first, the question is prefaced a little bit, saying, acknowledging that if you did work at Greenpeace as a Greenpeace affiliate, you could be a bridge between climate justice and the link between climate justice and the concerns of the Black and brown communities, right?
Yeah.
To understand, the racial oppression and energy oppression is what is being called, right?
I talk about this often because the reason why environmentalism hasn't been solved is because white environmentalism talks about environmentalism differently than brown environmentalism. Greenpeace says we need to stop polluting water. And I worked there for so long, and they would not help me out with the second most toxic Superfund site that was half a mile from their neighborhood, from their office in my neighborhood. Greenpeace does what they do very well. But it is white environmentalism. Hey, we got to stop polluting water. When brown people say it, they say, stop poisoning me. Stop poisoning my child. So I had the executive director of Greenpeace on one of our panels at our environmental justice summit. We run the largest environmental justice summit on the West Coast, rooted in hip hop and Black and brownness, and it's free all ages. Paid for by big white corporations that, have money, because we don't. And then we bring it to the hood and invite all the small brown nonprofits trying to fight the different, things going on in our community so they can connect to the people. But the executive director of Greenpeace in 2016 said, how do we get Black people to care about polar bears? She said that in front of a sea of Black people in Oakland. And this is the disconnect. And this is why white environmentalism can never work. Because they are talking about something they don't live, and they're putting up pictures of polar bears, right? If you want to stop something, put up pictures of babies that have deformities, right? Our environmentalism is not the same. You know what I'm saying? So what we're doing with Hip Hop for Change is right now we're building the largest environmental justice event. I'm going to put it on Earth Day, so no nonprofit wants to go up against the blackest eco justice event on Earth Day in the world. They're either going to join us or they're going to look stupid. And that's what I'm doing. So this year in August, we're going to have it at the Presidio Memorial Trust. working with different orgs like the EPA, Office of Environmental Justice, Parks California, Surfrider Foundation, Sierra Club. And it's going to be an event so we can center Black and brown voices, indigenous voices, and tell people, hey, we're dying here. And if you ain't getting with the program, we're going to start calling you out. And so Greenpeace has actually never donated to our event. So they have about a year before I start pointing my ire at them.
Yeah, I was going to say, just to follow up on that, because I mean, we advocate for ESG and impact investing and so, right? And that's a multi-trillion-dollar market of capital available, right? And it just seems to be, there's some very good opportunities there to tap into those using the BIPOC narratives and equating that with climate justice, right? And especially climate change. There's so much capital in that space as well. I think there's a lot of opportunities that once you could measure what those impacts are, and the fact that you have people who could claim this is how we suffer from this, it means you have people who are willing to report what our suffering is, and you can now measure that impact, and then there's an incentive to manage it. So I think there's actually an opportunity there for whoever else could be listening to this right now, and or to connect with those opportunities. There's a whole narrative out there that could be game changing. And you're in Oakland. When we discuss this, you're like right at the opposite end of the bay from the most powerful VCs in the world, right?
Yeah,
so,
but that's the problem here, because Black-led nonprofits have 56% the money on hand as white-led nonprofits, and about 70% less savings. It has always been about capital. It's always been about social capital, which is the thing white supremacy kills second to our lives, right? I'm sitting right next to Silicon Valley, and I have no idea how to talk to anybody in Silicon Valley, right? I don't even know if they would sit in a room with me or if they'd grab their babies. I have no idea. And when I write a grant, I actually have to write down that my culture is valid first before I can even speak about my program. So that's always been the hard part. You know, even nonprofits, you know, we run such a lean budget. One of the things that Black arts nonprofits have, you know, one of the issues we have the most is having the resources to actually aggregate data, pay somebody to analyze it and break it down. And this is just, it's the death of a thousand cuts. So if anybody wants to help out, I mean, we are still fundraising for our Women's Empowerment Summit 2 weeks from now. That's going to be centered around mothers in hip hop. So we can pay those beautiful, amazingly powerful female identified artists, let alone the 150,000 we have to raise in August. So I don't know. I believe we're going to do it. You know, I have faith, and we've done crazy things already, but yeah, we just need the capital. And essentially, I don't understand why philanthropy doesn't change, because all these Black and brown nonprofits that have the best methodologies, the leanest budgets, the most impactful means, like give me $1 million, I could probably save 1 million Black and brown youth. I don't know. That's just a guess, but I'm here.
No, there's a lot of potential, but I think it's just maybe to make those connections. Okay, we'll talk later. We'll talk later, right? Okay. So we have a few more questions here. Generation there. Okay, if I could get the questions right here. It said there's a generation gap of hip hop versus the older generation. So this is a 3-part question, right? First question is, generation gap of hip hop versus the older generation. Can we make the bridge?
Yeah, so number one, I think that just like always, you know, when older folks said, don't do that rock and roll, right, back in the days, I think that's what we're doing. But unfortunately, hip hop has been so commodified, all our older hip hop heads are seeing is this mumble rap, this, you know, this celebration of pathology. And I think a lot of our OGs are falling into that same conditioning. Even I had to stop and say, oh, you know, because I started getting snobby when it comes to mumble rap. And I can't knock a kid who's doing his best. So essentially, we can't fall for the same okie doke that I think white America is falling for as hip hop heads.
Right. Okay, next question is about bridging gaps, right? Poetry and the connection with hip hop. Can we make the bridge?
Poetry is hip hop that has a fealty to a 4/4 time signature predominantly, period. It is poetry, it just is. And essentially, I think a lot of people think that in order to be hip hop, even when I do my lectures, I say, I'm gonna teach you, you can freestyle. And the reason you think you can is because of white supremacy. And people essentially think that in order to rap, you have to slouch, maybe even like grab your genitals and think bad about women. I think I'm the dopest thing in the room. And if I can't embody that mental space, then I don't have the ability to rap. And that is the furthest thing from what rap is. You know what I'm saying? Rap is poetry with a fealty to a 4/4 time signature beat predominantly. And so if you have ever engaged in poetry, but you think you can't engage in rap or that it's different, congratulations, you just realize you've been conditioned by white supremacist constructs about our culture. So I would say unlearn that. I would say go put on a freaking beat right now, as soon as you get off this thing, and try to write an 8-bar rap about climate change. I just rap for the international climate, thing that happened a couple weeks ago. I rap about food sometimes. I rap about anything I want to. I rap about what comes to my mind. That's what poetry is. So that's all hip hop is. That's all, rap is poetry over a 4/4 time signature beat. You are allowed to try.
And this person's last question, we addressed already about climate change and the hip hop community. Now can we make the bridge? So I think we addressed that already, unless you want to say anything more.
I would say again, this is another misnomer. Remember, Black people rap about everything that we deal with. Brown people rap about everything they deal with. Gay people rap about everything they deal with. You know what I'm saying? Like, hip hop community looks like the Jewish community looks like. Has the same number of jerks in it. Has the same number of really beautiful people in it. We're people. You know what I'm saying? So, especially climate change is so important for us. I know rappers that rap about food justice. Period. You know what I'm saying? So we don't need to make that bridge. What we need to do is make the bridge between white activism and the people on the ground that have been doing this for the last 400 years, trying to hold on to our resources and our clean environment.
All right. Okay, here's a little bit of a segue question, if I could say that. Can you explain what you mean when you call a woman a Karen?
Yes.
Are there Karens of color, and does that not create chasms between your movement and women?
There are very few Karens of color, but it is possible. What Karen is it's an idea about a type of privileged white woman. Generally speaking, the trope of, let me speak to your manager, or the privilege, you didn't serve me the way I think you need to, you need to bend to me. This happens all the time. The idea of Karening can be something as simple as 3 white women walking down the entire street and not moving to make sure I can pass. Like, it's a privilege. It's not only privilege, but it's also a privilege connected with an entitlement over somebody else's body, right? You have to serve me now, or I'm gonna call the police because I don't feel safe and you're doing something that is not worthy of calling a gun to the situation, but I'm gonna stop you because this is not right. And this is this privileged entitlement and this ownership over other people's bodies that we call Karen. And it usually happens from a white woman, because remember, it has to be an intersection of privilege, right? And trying to dominate somebody with that privilege. Black women don't have that, you know what I'm saying? And for the most part, we're not conditioned to. And if we do try to embody that space, we will get batted down by white America. So Karens are almost, people are trying to make it a everybody thing. It's not. It's specifically speaking to white women, and also Kens speaking to white men using their privilege within the society that uplifts that privilege. So without the society uplifting the privilege, you do not have the Karen effect. And you can't call, no Black woman's gonna call the cops on 4 white kids going into a bank and that works out. You know what I'm saying? The police will probably talk to that Black woman, at least here.
All right, okay. So moving across the pond, well, that'd be a far journey for you, right? Given you're on the West Coast, right? What advice would you give anti-racist activists in Europe where the systems are so strong?
Yeah. First off, it's difficult because I've never been to Europe. I cannot wait for y'all to fly me out to Cambridge to speak in person. And I can't wait to get over there. But I think anti-racism is an action, right? It is not a mentality, right? It is an action. It is something that you force yourself to do when the time comes. And I think the root of anti-racism, or anti-patriarchy in my case, was reading, right? And edifying myself, learning my privileges, and then getting the courage to attack, patriarchy when I see it. When I see a man catcalling a woman down the street, hey, yo, stop that. You know what I'm saying? Putting myself on the machine, so to speak, put my body on the machine like Mario Savio. So to be an anti-racist, I actually deal with this on LinkedIn a lot, right? Somebody will come up and they'll say something racist, and I have all these homies that will start dressing them down for me. That feels so good to me as a Black man. So I would say if you want to be an anti-racist, learn what your fellow humans are going through, right? Anti-racism is the same thing that you would do for your own children naturally. It's just making sure that you understand what people are going through in their own communities so you can help them and care for them the same way you would do for your own community because you see them as your community. In order to do that, you also have to know what they're going through so you can be a true ally with anti-racist practices. So anti-racism is an action. It is not a mentality, right? It is rooted in learning and understanding community. So if you want to be anti-racist, especially for young kids in the UK right now who are dealing with the society's perceptions around drill music, for example, these young Black and brown kids trying to wear their COVID masks and looking even more like robbers. I remember when the mask first came out, I was like, oh no. I was like, oh no, I gotta wear a mask in a bank. Are you kidding me? And it's that, like, I wear a grill, right? I wear a gold grill and I buy grills for everybody in my office. And I had this white lady say, I've never heard somebody speak so eloquent wearing one of those. Why do you wear it? And she was wearing diamond tennis bracelets and got gold, all, you know, like we're the same. We just deal with different things. So learn about what other people are dealing with and give them the same love you give your own babies.
All right, we're coming up with time. I have one last question for you, right, from the audience, right? And this last question is, can you offer us a list of artists where I can find love?
Yes. Yes. And these are gonna be really Bay Area centric artists because I just want to elevate people that I'm in love with as artists. My favorite group in the world is called Soul Development, S-O-L Development. They're out of Oakland and they turn tragedy into the most beautiful music you've ever heard in your life. I don't want to speak on it. I might start crying. I'd also talk about Kev Choice, Kev, K-E-V Choice. He's a world-class pianist, the artistic director at Oakland School of Music. He's a world-class rapper and singer as well. He raps with the Symphony here in San Francisco. I'd also look up Ryan Nicole. Ryan Nicole, another artist out here. And I wanted you all to look up one specific one. It's a track called Us by Ruby Ibarra, R-U-B-Y-I-B-B-E-R-A, and Rocky Rivera, R-O-C-K-Y-R-I-V-E-R-A. Us, they are Filipino women's like rappers and they're rapping about their culture. If you want to see culture, you play that. And one more, there's an artist named Superman, S-U-P-A, Man, M-A-N. He's an indigenous Lakota rapper. He's got a song called The Prayer Loop. And those are artists, these are all smaller name artists. There's also a tribe called Red. They're a great indigenous rap group. But these are just rap artists, you know what I'm saying? I would say, like, if you type in conscious hip hop in YouTube, you'll probably find some of the coolest stuff in the world. Another artist, Sa Rock, S-A space R-O-C, Sa Rock. Amazing. But any other genre of music, you see how diverse it is and how beautiful the narratives are? Hip hop is the same way.
Okay, everyone.
I've definitely noted those. So, okay, so then we go to close now. So, Michael?
Yeah, okay, everyone. Well, unfortunately, it was a very nice Q&A session with Khafre, but we've reached our cutoff time for tonight. So I would like to thank Khafre Jay, and I would also like to thank Navin for this great Q&A session. And I hope everyone's enjoyed this session. Thank you, as always. Everyone in our events team at the Cambridge QSIS who helped us produce this event. Please be sure to check our webpage for future events. Again, it is QSIS.org. Thank you all for joining us from all over the world and in many different time zones today. Take care and stay safe.
Bye, everybody.